Welcome back to another phenomenal episode, if I do say so myself, to Inclusion Starts Now, the podcast. I'm not sure how to really entertain, how to do this. Anyways, today I talk with Adam, who loves horror films, and we wanted to talk about how there is so much ableism in horror films and how you don't have to have ableism for a movie to stay scary. Go enjoy this great conversation Adam and I had and really feel the theme of how we fear the unknown. Before we get to our podcast episode, I do want to talk about how important your local bookstore is. So if you are looking to go buy your next book, if you're looking to go get holiday gifts, if you're not going to support a self-published author on their website, inclusionstartsnow.com, then you should go to your local bookstore and support them. I did come prepared and wear my like Frankenstein's monster shirt, and this is him as a rock star. You see, as a
I just picked up a Frankenstein shirt too and totally forgot to make sure it was
oh,
for today. So
I yeah, I this was a new shirt. I seriously like ran over and just changed. One of the things that took me a while to get onto the call. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you maybe, I guess if we could start with you like introducing yourself and what you do and why we're going to talk about horror films, I guess.
okay, cool. Yeah. Hi, I'm Adam Carney. I'm a person with osteogenesis imperfecta, type 3-4. And that just kind of generally means that my bones break easy and my body doesn't make a certain protein correctly. Um, but yeah, I'm a graphic designer by day and horror movie junkie by night.
That
I
seems
love.
like a bad time to be really into horror movies at
No,
nighttime.
it's the perfect time. You can't watch a horror movie like in the broad daylight. It just doesn't resonate. Um, but yeah, like I love watching all sorts of horror from like thrillers to old slashers and um particularly the cheesy ones. But I have found that the classic monster genre really resonates with me through the lens of disability. For me personally, my favorite's the Wolfman, werewolves, the duality of a werewolf really reminds me of the duality of the medical and social models of disability, you know, where one kind of accepts the medical diagnosis and the other accepts that people with disabilities are just humans as well, you know, and equality. But much like the Wolfman, we don't have control over which one shows up, you know? And that really,
Whoa.
yeah, I know that when I explain that,
I should have watched that. You should have told me to watch that one.
so usually where Frankenstein hangs here behind me, I have a
Yeah.
werewolf mask that came from the dollar store that I have attached chain to below, to make them quite fancy. I don't know where I put it now. Oh, it's kind of right
Oh
behind me.
yeah.
Metallic. So I don't know if you know
Ooh.
the musician Orville Peck, but he wears like these kind of Zorro masks with chain hanging from them. So that's kind
You
of
got
my
that at the Dollar Tree? Like just the mask at the Dollar Tree?
just the
What'd you say?
plastic part, yeah. And then I
Wow.
painted silver and then did kind of a black wash on it to really bring out the recesses in the mask to make it look aged. And then I glued all the chain onto it to make it look fancy. But
Yeah, that looks really cool.
yeah, and I did a gold one as well.
That's awesome. So
Yeah,
what
so
got you? Oh yeah, no, go.
um yeah, it's kind of I've been slowly piecing together an art show based on werewolves, just because it does resonate with me so much. So my apartment is just scattered with odds and ends of werewolf toys, half-finished projects, and all sorts of things. So, but
That's amazing.
what were you about to say?
No, well, I was gonna ask what like got you started in this? Like, what was the first horror film you saw that you were like just so
Oh,
invested?
man, that's really tough. Um, Probably the one that like really stands out to me as like the horror movie is Jaws. I've never been able to swim in deep water since, and sharks haunt my dreams. So that's definitely the one that like landed the impact for me. But I kind of grew up watching like the Ghostbusters and like the Ghostbusters cartoons. There's this amazing movie from the 80s called The Monster Squad, where a group of kids have to take down the Universal monsters. And then like there's this cult classic Canadian TV show called The Hilarious House of Frightenstein. And I
Yeah.
highly recommend anyone who hasn't checked it out to like just go to YouTube, type in Hilarious House of Frightenstein. It was recorded on like a shoestring budget and has guest appearances by Vincent Price, where he recites really kind of cheesy poetry, wearing costumes and stuff. So it there was always just some kind of consistent horror in the
Yeah.
pop culture that I was raised in. And so as I got older, especially I, going back to the Jaws thing, the first time I watched Jaws, I had broken, I think, my collarbone and was like laid up in the living room. And my mom was like, well, I'll go rent you a bunch of movies since it's summertime and you're not going anywhere. And she asked what I wanted to see, and I was like, I want to see Jaws. Like kids are talking about this Jaws movie. And so I think it was like grade seven or something, I watched it. And so with that, whenever I'm healing from a broken bone or whatever, I end up watching a lot of movies. And so that has transpired into me watching a lot of movies, but watching a lot of horror thriller style flicks. So yeah.
Yeah. So Jaws scared you, but none of the other ones have?
I mean, they didn't leave their like fingerprint on me as harshly
Oh
as
my gosh.
the shark. I guess the like shadowy figure kind of thing. I have a lot of friends, and it's kind of a common through line that like we've all had nightmares of a shadowy figure emerging from our childhood house's basement and coming
Yeah.
after us. Or like, and just this kind of general sense of dread, which I definitely must have picked up from some horror movie,
Yeah.
unless some sort of instinctual thing. But yeah, no, sharks, man. They're like the real life horror like villain, right? Like
Yeah.
they kill what seems to us indiscriminately, right? And like we are no match to their powers in the water, right? Like once they get pulled out of the water, they're pretty, you can just keep your distance, but in the water, you're just kind of screwed. Um,
I mean, I'm from Southern California, so I grew up with beaches and I never, even before seeing Jaws, I was never a fan of going that far into the water because I didn't like that you couldn't see what was below you. Like that whole just idea really freaked me out. Um, and I think it just continues to, but I don't know if it's really sharks that freak me out. It's literally just anything that can be underneath me that I can't see or know that it's there. But I really don't like the movies that are all about like being possessed and like that really freaks me out. If
yeah,
anything is about like go like the whole being possessed thing, I'm like I don't even want to watch the trailer. I'm like nope, that's I can't do that.
yeah, The Exorcist was is such a great movie for that, right? And like you have to
Yeah.
think when that came out, that really challenged a lot of Catholic culture, right? Like so many people were just born and raised to fear this thing, and here it was put on screen. And I think that's that what you were talking about of why you're afraid of dark water really translates a lot to what makes a good horror or thriller is the sense of the unknown, right? And like
Hmm.
you like Jaws, they barely showed the shark in the movie, and it left you with this great, tremendous sense of dread and anxiety because you didn't know what when it was going to come, where it's coming from, and all that. But like there's so many examples of that throughout horror movies too, where it's like in the village, you really don't see the monster that's haunting this village. You only see it in passing every few moments, and it just allows our imaginations to run and fill in the blanks. And usually, when we're scared, that thing is really intense, right? And we magnify it, we kind of catastrophize it. And so
Yeah.
for me, the best horrors and best thrillers are the ones that leave a lot unexplained. You know, those movies where your friends are like, I don't get it. They don't like you call that an ending?
Yeah.
I don't even know what happened. And I'm like, that was great. That I'm gonna be thinking about
Yeah.
that thing for weeks.
That you are just blowing my mind in so many different ways. First off, like what you said about the exorcism, comparing it to like the Catholic Church, I never have even thought of comparing. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I've never seen The Exorcist all the way through. I have seen bits and pieces of it. I've seen the scary movie comedy where they make fun of it.
Right.
Um, I have no desire to see that movie all the way through, but that is like just it makes me now want to watch it because now I love talking about religion. I think religion is so interesting. Um, and I love comparing it to cults and I love comparing it to like, what people need and faith and like the support that people need. Um,
So
so
I
that's just like mind blowing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to ask a question. So, if possession movies are like kind of your Achilles heel, how do you feel about like zombie movies or like infection movies?
Okay. So that's okay. I've thought a lot about zombie movies because usually they don't freak me out because they're like I don't know, like that one. Okay, the one that really freaked me out was the one that I think Brad Pitt was in.
Oh, World
Um,
War Z. Yeah, yeah.
yes, where they're like running really fast and like really they seem really strong and I feel like you're about to compare this to like a disability comparison. I'm not sure if you are, but I guess in my head, it's like making me even rethink why I was so afraid of that movie and not a lot of other zombie movies. Because I guess I'm always like, they're walking really slow and they always make zombies kind of seem like they're not very intelligent. So it's like, I guess to me, I wasn't afraid of that version of zombies, but I mean, I definitely was thinking about zombies a lot during like COVID when COVID first started. I mean, I'm sure a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of people were. Um, Part of me even got eye surgery because I was my eyesight was just really bad and without glasses I wasn't able to see very well, so I got contact lens implants. But one of the reasons was because I was like, if there was ever a reason that I had to get up at nighttime and run, like if I didn't have time to grab my glasses, I would not be able to see. And that idea freaked me out. Um, oh my God, I feel like we're about to get into like a therapy session.
So why I brought that up was I never drew a correlation between like a possession movie and a zombie movie or an outbreak movie until I watched a movie that came out late last year, I think, called When Evil Lurks. I believe it's a Spanish movie. But what they did
Mhm.
was they took both worlds and mashed it together. So there's an outbreak that's happening, but the outbreak is demonic possession.
Oh my
And
God,
like,
that sounds horrible.
oh, but it's so good.
And by horrible, I mean terrifying. Two
Yeah,
different.
yeah. But like when you think about it, right? Like, A possession is like essentially being infected by the devil, right? And then zombies or 28 days later, where it's a rage virus that is spread through infection, right? And so like it was this movie that actually took the leap to crossing over. And then you're like, oh yeah, the two aren't dissimilar. It's just generally when you watch a possession movie, it's about a singular person, right? In that singular case, and never outside of that
Yeah.
realm. So
Wow. So how are they being possessed? Because I am interested. Because yeah, it is usually like, or it's like this one spirit that's possessing all of these different people. Like it's jumping from person to person or something. So how did it make it like part of the virus? Or will that be spoiling the ending of the movie?
I I don't really want to give it too much away because even saying that it's a possession kind of spoils, forget where that's divulged in the movie. But I guess I
Okay,
should have
what is it called again?
When Evil Lurks, and it's a foreign flick. Um,
That
I
sounds
do have
terrifying.
to do have to warn there is it the violence in it can be quite graphic. Um,
Good to know. Well, is it like obviously fake? Like, in Scream or like there's a lot of movies I feel like where, yeah, it's really bloody and gross, but it's also like feels
it's
unrealistic still.
pretty visceral. Like it's pretty like it had me on edge. Like, whoa, this movie is not holding back.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I
Yeah.
don't even know if I could see the trailer. I'm about to be like single parenting for the next few days. I mean, by the time this podcast airs, I will not be single parenting, but I can tell you right now, I'm not watching this trailer for like another week.
Yeah. Definitely lights on, middle of the day.
Because I feel like there people who get like really bad fevers who
Hallucinate?
like hallucinate. Yeah, I feel like that makes sense in this. So like it because it does seem like people are possessed when they have like really bad fevers and they're like hallucinating or saying stuff and you're just like, what is happening? Like, so
And
this
actually,
makes me very interested.
I'm so much of a horror nerd that probably 15 years ago I was walking or going through a bookstore, like a big chain bookstore, and a title of a book just jumped off the shelf at me. It was called The Origins of Satan. And I was like, oh man, that's super metal. That's awesome. I'm gonna read. And I picked it up and I started reading it, and it's very academic. Whoever wrote it, I forget who they are now, but like definitely have studied theology, and like it just sat on my shelf for 15 years. And then I was at Value Village and I found this book. It's a memoir of a priest who is an exorcist within the Roman Catholic Church. And so I was like, oh my God, what a dual, like what a combo, right? Like we'll read about the origin of Satan and then the being that fights Satan afterwards. And it was really interesting. It was really cool because like the way the priest broke it down was like you have to have incredible faith in order to be possessed. In that, like you need to believe in the evil that is coming into you, and it broke all these things down. And even he admitted that like there are things that religion cannot do, and that therapists should be brought in to do. And so when you're saying that like somebody with a high fever who is hallucinating or potentially going into seizures, that's going to look a lot like what movies have shown us to be a possession type of situation, right?
Yeah.
And actually, I thought the
So
same thing about the beginning of the Frankenstein play too. I thought Benedict Cumberbatch had an interesting take of how Frankenstein would come to life, but we could
yeah.
after that.
Um I have okay, yes, because I really want to ask about so the priest's memoir that he wrote.
Yeah.
I guess it's like like, so that line of like, you can only be possessed if you like really believe in those evils. Like, why? Like, why? Like, why wouldn't you be able, like, if that evil was real, why wouldn't you be able to get possessed if you didn't believe it?
You'd have to talk to a priest
Is
about that.
my, I guess I'll have to be the next podcast episode interview.
So, they did make a movie out of the memoir, and it came out last year, or the year before, with Russell Crowe in it. I think
Oh,
it's called The Pope's Exorcist, or the something Exorcist.
oh, I do think I remember seeing an ad for that.
Yeah.
If there's anything really about like a scary movie that ties in with religion, I usually just am like, no, I'm not. I don't I too often have to sit in a dark room with my kids and like make them like get them to go to sleep. Like there's no way I could comfortably be in a dark room with all those ideas in my head.
Oh, yeah.
I
There's
used to
only
love scary movies. I used to love them until I lived alone in my 20s and then I was like, "Oh, this isn't fun because now I'm scared."
yeah.
Like now I need to sleep with a light on.
So after, so in when was that? There's only one movie that I've ever turned off because I was too afraid and it was too intense. And
Really?
I was in my 20s. I had a roommate. He was out at the bar. I decided to partake in some marijuana. And I was like, I heard good things about this movie. And I turn off all the lights. I light a candle and I start watching a movie called The Poughkeepsie Tapes. And the whole premise of the movie is there's a serial killer out on the loose, and he has been capturing his criminal activities on VHS. And they find the VHSs. And so it's set up like a fake documentary where they're playing clips from the VHS while talking to people who are supposed to be FBI directors and all these people and detectives. And so the first time I tried watching it, I made it about 10 minutes in, and it got so creepy because he would break into people's houses and film them from like the closet or whatever. And so you're like, that's weird, man. And then
Uh,
like cut and then show another one of his things. I won't get into details about it. But at a certain point, I was just like, nope, 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 nope. I turn it off, I turn on all the lights, and I had to search my entire apartment. I had to go through every closet, turn on every light, and I was like, that movie is too evil for me. And so like two
yeah.
weeks later, my roommates around, and I'd already told him the story. I was like, this thing is too much. And so we both tried to sit down and watch it, and we made it another like 5 minutes in. And we were both like, nope, I'll check my closet, you check your closet. It
Oh
was
my gosh. I don't even want to look up the trailer for that. That sounds so scary because and I've definitely gotten home from scary movies where you're like checking the doors and everything because
oh
you're like
yeah.
all in that suspense mode. But I just stopped watching scary movies and I kind of have stopped doing that. But what we are here to talk about is to talk about like the ableism in horror films. And I was looking a lot into, I guess I never really thought about the connection between even like in asylums with uh like how people use it as like this horror like haunted house thing now, where it was like that was for patients like with disabilities. And then also talking about Frankenstein. So now I just feel like I brought up two completely, totally different things. I really want to talk about Frankenstein, but now I brought up this asylum thing. Have you watched movies with like asylums in it, or have you thought about that area, that topic?
The ableism surrounding asylums. Yeah, I've watched a number of asylum-based movies. The one that always comes to mind is Session 9. It stars a young David Caruso from
I have
CSI.
never heard of Session Nine, which
So it's about a
feels
team
okay.
of like hazardous waste people. They get a contract, and they have to go into this old asylum to clean out asbestos. But while they're working, some weird stuff starts happening and crew members start disappearing. Um, but like the way it unravels is really quite um genius. Like I'm doing that thing where it's like, how much can I say without giving away the premise of the movie? But there's a lot to it. Like the old reel-to-reel interview tapes getting played.
Yeah,
And the main interview is with somebody with multiple personality disorder, I think is. I don't know if that's
yeah.
actually a clinical term for it or not, but each tape is kind of a
I
different.
think it is.
Uh,
I'm
y-
pretty sure it is.
yeah, so like each tape is an interview with a different personality, and those get played throughout the film. It's amazing, but
Oh,
it it
I might have seen the trailer for that. That actually sounds really familiar.
yeah, it was like an early 2000s flick. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think at the core of it, um, like horror movies for as long as they've existed, generally have served to vilify people with disability, right? Even when you look at like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, um,
Hmm.
there's a lot of stereotyping, a lot of oh man, lose my words. Like discrimination, just a lot of vilifying, And anyway, again, it goes back to the unknown, right? Because for generations and generations and generations, the way our society has handled people with disability has been to isolate and to
Hmm.
institutionalize. And what that served to do is to disconnect the communities of people with disability with the quote unquote like able-bodied people without disability. And so over generations, there's just been this lack of understanding towards disability. And if you ask me, it all goes back to the church, and their lack of understanding of what disability is, and the lessons of Jesus saying that healed people with disability and by absolving them of their sins, and so thereby disability is cast in a negative light or vilified evil, that is should not be accepted, that you're just not trying hard enough, that if you pray harder, that it'll go away. And so I can only speak to my experience as someone who grew up in the church and seeing it, that like people would come up to me and say, "I'll pray for you," and it's like,
Yeah.
thanks, but like I don't know what prayer is gonna do for a genetic disability. But for me, I feel as though it's that the fear of the dark, fear of the deep water, fear of that, is just being reflected by our ableist society as a fear of the unknown. And for all intents and purposes, the unknown is people with disability because we don't exist within popular culture. We don't really exist within society in the same ways. And so until we really like work towards demystifying disability, I feel like that's always going to be the go-to, right? Um, like how many bad
Yeah.
people have a limp? How many
Oh,
like
yeah.
stutters? Like it's always something along those lines that is the tell of somebody's um evilness, badness, however you want to say it.
Yeah. I mean, so you're probably the first person who's ever told me um how much stems from religion. And I mean, I would kind of even say like when religion started more, or like historic, well, I don't know, because then you also said the pray, like I'll pray for you, which I know a lot of people hear. Because so I do not, I'm not a churchgoer. I do not identify as religious, but I went to a church for my friend recently as like a secret shopper. They wanted me to go and like uh tell them my thoughts about their church, because they like need to get more people. And I went, and what I thought was really interesting was that it was like one of the most inclusive places I've ever been, that they had, and also like 80% of the people there were older. Like there were a lot of people who used wheelchairs or walkers. So all the aisles were big enough for people who were using wheelchairs or walkers to walk around. They had closed captions on everything, like the singing, the people talking, and they were like big on a screen so everybody could read it. Um, and there
Now,
was also a kid I noticed with who was, I'm assuming, an autistic child, because he had headphones on and he was like kind of stimming and doing his thing, and everybody was like very much accepted it. It was all like, yeah, he's here to
yeah,
like watch, be at church. So it was like interesting, because I left it being like, wow, you guys were really accommodating to the needs that the people had to attend church, which I thought was really interesting. But, there are also churches do better when there's more people to pay into the church and to go and attend the church. So like I see why they would be accommodating.
my comment on that would be, you really have to know your demographic, right? And
Yeah.
well, you kind of said it in your explanation of it, is um the church is seeing less and less young people go to church. And so, of course, the money that they're getting is coming from an older generation who is aging into disability. And so, in order to keep those people coming to church and keep those people paying into their coffers, it's in their best interest to adapt for them. It's not necessarily an adaptation, in my opinion, for outsiders to come in, but actually for the people who are at like paying the bills. It's like, yeah, of course, let's build more ramps.
Yeah.
Let's do all these things. Being raised in the church, something that I found was that at one point in my high school years, our church got one priest left, new priest came in. New priest was all about our community is diminishing. We need to like cast those nets and bring community in, all the people who are afraid and who didn't understand the message and all this. And so it became very inclusive and very understanding. And this was at a time when gay rights were really changing, right? And the church was still adamantly against it. They hadn't really changed anything, but this priest was kind of winking and nodding, and I was like, oh, this is progressive. This is awesome. And that message only lasted maybe a few months, and then all of a sudden, once I feel as though he had cast his nets farther, his message really changed into we need to do away with these evil ways. And it's like, oh, I get it. Like this was on purpose. You wanted to bring people in to then preach to them, like make them feel
Yeah.
safe about not telling them
Oh.
about how they were wrong.
Ugh.
And then like, now that you're here, by the way.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so yucky. That is not a
Yeah,
good
but
experience.
so like even though I myself am not a believer in a believer at all, let's just say blankly there. I can still see the power of how it helps others, right? And I
Yeah.
really believe that that's awesome in the true definition of like awe. Like and and so it isn't until people use that community in a negative way that I finally stand up and say, yeah, that's it's not this no longer is cool. You're using it to bully
Yeah.
and to do
Well, So what I tell people a lot about religion, like in my opinion, as someone who has like I studied Bible lit in high school and I did world religions in college because they were classes that were available in my schedule and they knocked off requirements, but they were also really interesting to learn about. And what the pretty much like common thing was, other than like, what makes us morally good or bad, was that it was giving you this like faith in something that we really don't know what the answer is, of like what happens after someone dies. Like, do good people get a better ending afterwards? Or, it's kind of like this reassurance, well, faith. Uh, but it makes me think a lot about what you were saying before, of just like villainizing disabled people in movies. It's because of this fear of like the unknown, and how much we just like kind of, um I mean, to me, especially with like including people, because my whole focus is like educating people on the disabled community, on like why that's important and why we should all be allies and like be accommodating, is because I feel like people just don't know about about accommodations, like about different ways of communicating. Um, but I feel like I don't know, this whole episode is just making me feel like the fear of the unknown is just like the theme. Um,
And I
and
think
you were
that's,
saying something about the movie Frankenstein with this theme, but what were
yeah.
you gonna say?
Uh,
And then I swear we're gonna
well,
talk about Frankenstein.
before we jump in there, the kind of interesting thing is like no one gets out of this life without acquiring disability unless they die before, right? Like our bodies diminish, they age, things slowly don't work like
Yeah,
they used to. And I think that's really terrifying for a lot of people because it is an unknown. And why it's so important to have people with disability more included in society is people grow to understand that disability isn't inherently a wrong or bad thing, right? Disability is only a bad thing when accommodations aren't being made, right? Like it
yeah,
really isn't a bad thing. And so it happens so often to me that somebody who is older will go through something or acquire disability and they're like, I never considered it. I never understood it, but boy, oh boy, do I get it now. It's like, cool. Okay. Well, like I'm not here absolve you of anything, but like, like maybe go talk to your buddies that are still shit talking disability.
yeah.
Tell them on
Seriously,
the golf course to stop being jerks about not hiring people with disability and thing. And so I really wanted to kind of address that before moving on
yeah.
to a point in the Frankenstein movie where unlike in the book and unlike in the play, they really do focus on how Frankenstein's creature or monster is made. And in the movie portion, his assistant, who at one point gets referred to as Fritz, but has now kind of become known as Igor, um, is charged with collecting a brain from a science laboratory. And the professor is lecturing his students about how the brains of criminals are different from the brains of the ordinary. And and so the assistant manages to break the container with the normal brain and then has to go back and collect the criminal brain. And that's the brain that gets into Frankenstein, right? And so
The
everybody,
criminal brain does?
yeah. So
Okay.
it's the bad brain that is running Frankenstein. But throughout the movie and even throughout the book too, or not the book, the play. The play and the book do differ slightly. So in the movie version, the only person really that Frankenstein kills who's and innocent is the little girl. He meets a little girl and she's throwing flowers into a pond, and then he runs out of flowers to throw to float, and so he picks her up and throws her and kills her. Um, and so that's really the driving point for the mob to rally up against Frankenstein. And they're just afraid of this monster that they don't understand. And so they show up with torches and burn them alive inside of an old windmill. Um, and so it's really interesting in that the mob mentality of it, right? It doesn't take much for the mob to rally around the unknown and vilify it, because that's the
Yeah.
easiest thing to do. Is like, we don't understand this big green thing wandering around our town. Well, we should probably take care of that. And it also kind of speaks to the police state too, but we can skirt that. Uh,
That's
and
a whole other podcast.
oh, whole other podcast. Um, But what's kind of interesting in that the book and the play with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller is that in the book, it's alluded that he's found a chemical compound and a way of reanimating the dead, right? And in the book, Frankenstein just disappears, like he leaves. He goes, wanders out into nature, and comes across people who educate him. In the play, it's told that Frankenstein leaves him. He like just ditches him, like when he
Yeah.
becomes interested, right? And so it's interesting in the difference in storytelling and the difference in context too, because the play really deals with certain elements of ableism that I don't feel come across in the same way in the book. And then like it's interesting too that the movie jumps to the extreme to really I guess you got to tell a good story, right? Like the
Yeah.
book it doesn't have a great ending. The book actually spoiler alert, ends with Frankenstein's monster just wandering around up north, like uncaptured, and like you don't get any
Oh.
information at all. And in the play, the doctor follows the monster into the unknown, right? And so, and that you couldn't have that be the ending of the story to a movie, right? Especially like, did Frankenstein survive or not? Come,
Yeah. I mean, I
come
kind
that
of feel like
footstep.
that's like the unknown. That's like why people like those movies, because then it's like, oh, and he's wandering around today. Like we don't know where he is. Like it leaves it to this like unknown and I don't know thing, for lack of better words. So was the play, watching the play, was that your first time watching that version?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what do you think of it? Also,
Um,
wait, before you talk about the play, I don't know if you know this, but those two actors would switch roles. Yeah. So when you went to go see the show, I don't think you knew who was playing. Like I think they kind of kept it secret and then they would just, you'd get there and then you'd see. So I also saw Cam, is it Cumberbatch? I never say his last name right.
Benedict.
I saw him as the monster. And I think
Yeah,
that's what you just said.
yeah. I think that's the version that got filmed because it was directed by Danny Boyle, who did like Trainspotting, Slumdog Millionaire, a whole bunch of movies. And so that's actually where I've heard about it first. I was like, oh, Danny Boyle and Frankenstein, that sounds amazing. And then it wasn't until like today that I actually sat down and watched it. I started it last night, but I fell asleep. It was a long day.
It's a
Uh,
long one. And the first opening scene, like that's a long scene watching him like learning to crawl and walk, which I thought it was a really good acting moment. I thought it was like a good scene, but I remember sitting because we watched it like we it was a recording, but we were like in a theater, and I just remember sitting there like, wow, this is this is a long scene.
It is, but it's even longer in the book.
Is it?
Well, it is because
Man.
um something that I feel that like got more addressed in the book than the movie is that like Frankenstein's dead, right? And so like he isn't affected by cold and weather the same way as humans are. Like he
Wait,
is
you do you mean Frankenstein like the monster?
the
Like,
monster, the creature, yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Not the doctor. The
Should we
doctor,
also say creature? Because I do know monster used to be like the medical term for people with disabilities like a long time ago.
okay, yeah,
Is
yeah,
creature the better word to say?
let's go with creature. So the creature comes into the book and he is telling his story to the doctor, and he's very articulate and he's very like well spoken, whereas in the play and in the movie those elements are really kind of um played down, especially in the movie. It's non-existent, but even in the
Yeah.
play Benedict is still speaking with an affectation, and still holding more true to the book than what the other versions of Frankenstein that we know, of the creature than we know. But uh, kind of generally, he is kind of a zombie. You know, he is the living
Yeah.
undead, um, right? Which again is uh, kind of adjacent to disability, in that we are the other, essentially, right?
Yeah. Well, okay, that I was about to I feel like that totally just made my brain like give a sidestep because I was not ready for that. But I was gonna say how like how everybody responded to him. It makes me think of like just behaviors in general in the classroom when people are like, that behavior is, that behavior is too much. Everyone else is being disrupted. It needs like that person needs to be like in their own room. Like they need to be segregated in the special ed classroom. Um, and so many times I feel like I'm talking to people where I'm like, okay, but that behavior means something. Like they're trying to communicate something. And like, even I have not seen the version where the creature throws the little girl into the water and she drowns, but like that before they might have been playing or something. And he was like, kind of this like developmentally at a younger, like he was only, recently has become
He was like
whatever he is.
a couple days old, essentially, and you really hit the nail on the head there too, because I really didn't address that. Is that they were playing, they were throwing flowers in the water, right? And so
Yeah.
they were watching the things that they threw in the water float, and then once Frankenstein ran out of things to throw, he was like, "Oh, I can throw this girl and she'll float," right? And so the reason, and what's interesting too, is I think all the adults that the creature comes into contact with before the girl have very negative reactions, whereas the girl has a much more like, "Oh, it's just a big person."
Yeah.
Like parents are big people, right? And I think that really holds true within the disability experience as well, in that whenever I get a question, if the question's from a child, is coming from a very innocent ignorance in the truest sense of like not knowing anything. And so almost every time I don't mind answering a kid's question, right? And then sometimes, most of the time, coming from older people, their questions are coming from a very loaded place. And I always have to take a moment to make sure I'm answering it in a proper way, that I'm not basically telling them to fuck off, but also like addressing what they're saying and why what they're saying is coming from a bad place and like why it's a negative thing. And so it's very interesting that so even though how problematic Frankenstein the movie is, they really kind of got that element right. And like if you
Yeah.
look at that story too, I know a lot of people with disability who feel that way, that they feel like the smallest like indiscretion and the mob is there to like, oh, like come
Yeah.
after them, right? Over what they've done. Um, I don't know where I was going with that, but
Okay. It makes me think of like internalized ableism of like, you know, a person is trying to learn, and then when people are or like if they have like a physical disability that like someone can see, like that automatic judgment towards you is like obviously detrimental to somebody, you know, trying to be like confident in themselves and not, you know, being told since they are like a baby um that they're like not in this normal category that for some reason society has created.
really beautiful thing that happens in the Monster Squad because it's a group of kids that are trying to take down Dracula and the gang of monsters. And the one kind of detractor from the Monster Squad, which is Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, the Mummy, and the creature from the Black Lagoon, is the creature, Frankenstein's creature, um, like befriends this little girl, and it's supposed to represent the little girl that he kills in the
Yeah.
original movie. But like, there's a scene where they're doing their nails together, and like a whole montage of them just buddy buddy, and like I don't know, it just flips that dynamic on its head, where it's like, oh yeah, Frankenstein's like not a bad guy, he's just big and misunderstood.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it feels like with the play too. I thought the play like watching him learn and like have that relationship with the person um who's blind, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And like learning to read and like learning just learning all that stuff. I thought it was a really good play or like perspective on like I think he says some line where he's like, why are we not like learning from our mistakes? Like, how has man not noticed that this doesn't work, but yet we're doing it again? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
why are people so mean? Like, and it was, that whole scene I thought was like really, I don't know, that like really hit me where I was just like, oh gosh, like, why do we keep doing, and I mean, I don't know, everyone knows that quote where it's like history repeats itself, but it's like, so then why? Like, why do we keep letting it repeat itself? Like, how,
Because we don't cement the lessons we've learned
yeah.
um, into our daily lives, potentially the way that we should or need to. What I kind of found interesting in the thing that I was mentioning earlier, in that the difference between the book and the play is that Frankenstein, the doctor in the play, just disregards or he just throws Frankenstein away, basically. He just like forgets about him, carries on about his life, going about being this medical doctor scholar. But in the book, Frankenstein runs away, and I feel as though the whole creation part gets kind of not really skipped over, but it's not really the key at what's at heart of the story. Um, it really almost seems as though Frankenstein's creature was created without a lot of forethought into what potentially could happen. And so in the book, Frankenstein's creature is just kind of out there and not really having much interaction with the doctor until in the story when he comes to him about him making him a partner, which was a big thing for me. Lately, I've really been reckoning with what it means to be a person with disability, in a very ableist dating scene, in
Mm.
that it feels as though, um, for me, and I've talked to a few other friends with disability about it, about just how society really desexualizes and for the greater
Yeah.
part genders people with disability. And so the fact that Frankenstein's coming to him and being like, I don't see anyone else like me who can understand me out there. And what makes me me is what you made me. And so the only way of me seeing myself is if you make me again, but in my partner's image. And so um in the play, Frankenstein, the doctor really amps up the dramatics about it, right? Like
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, you want this thing?" Ah, and like it really comes off as a gross thing,
Yeah.
like him teasing him and taunting him. And in the book version, it's much more the doctor coming to terms with what he's done with his first mistake, right? It's like, I made this one monster. What, sorry, I made this one creature and it's wreaking havoc. Like at that point, I think it's already killed his brother. And so, and the doctor's coming to realize that, like, well, if he's killed my brother, there's probably others in its wake type of thing. Um, but in the play version, he's confronted with it in a much more hostile way, I guess. And so it's really interesting how in the book version, it really doesn't address that sexualization as much. I guess it's there, but it was also written in like 1818 or something. So those kind of things weren't really widely discussed. And
Yeah.
I really think that's the one thing of the play that really hit me the hardest, I guess, was like having that mirror held up to me, where it's like, oh yeah, like I am Frankenstein's creature in the eyes of the dating community, right? It's like it's the unknown.
Yeah.
It's always been funny in that the people I connect most to generally have a person with disability in their life. So that unknown isn't as unknown, right? And so it was really interesting to see because up until like 2 days ago, my understanding of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's creature was just kind of a mindless creature running around being
Yeah.
misunderstood. But in the both the book and the play, there's quite an intellectual side to Frankenstein's creature that I
Yeah.
think largely gets erased
Yes.
throughout history, right? Which then speaks to disability erasure
Yes.
in
Well,
popular.
so I actually just this week I watched I think it was called Frankenstein's wife or gosh. 'Cause
Bride
that
of Frankenstein?
what?
Bride of Frankenstein?
Oh, maybe that.
Like where she has like big hair and like
Yeah.
a bit stripe through it? Yeah.
She only comes in at the very end. So that I we watched it and I was like, "Oh, cool. Like they're gonna make him a partner. They're gonna like let's see how this goes." The whole movie, she's not in it. And then she comes at the end and she's like terrified of him. Like he comes over and is like, "Hey, like I'm here." And she just keeps screaming. And then he like, I mean, spoiler alert, he like burns the house down with them and the new doctor in it because the first doctor who made him bailed and whatever.
Yeah.
Um but I thought it was just like, I mean, I guess just this like, as you said, the villainizing of like people with disabilities in these horror films. um, is a bummer.
It's
Like,
consistent. It's the fear of the unknown, right? Like
yeah,
it for me, generally in a horror movie, if that's the trope, it just feels like such low-hanging fruit in a genre. Like,
yeah,
oh cool, it's another slasher flick with a character who like Jason Voorhees, right? From Friday the 13th, or there's just been so many re examples of that, where it's the loner child with disability that gets slighted and then holds a grudge, and then 30 years later is
yes.
haunting the kids of the
Which
kids
is
that
actually
he
like how do people, I mean, okay, that storyline is like so common, but then how do people not watch it and be like, hey, maybe we should go like see why that person is not feeling included? Like maybe we should just get behind this now and like just like meet them and then maybe we'll actually like them and then we don't ever have to worry about a serial killer in 30 years because they'll be included in the community that they're a
That's
part
very idealistic of you. And I dream of a world where this is people's go-to. But I feel as though, hurt people. And in order for somebody to feel better, they need to put somebody else down.
of.
So much of our culture has been based on that. And I think a really interesting thing that we're seeing right now, within the comedy world is a lot of discussion about, like punching down and making fun of people, and and people blame it on wokeness. And it's like, well, maybe yes, but also like if you're good at your job, you can make fun of anything. It doesn't need to be a person with disability. It doesn't
Yeah.
need to be any sort of minority community. Like if you're good at your job, you should be able to make
Yeah.
anything funny, right? It does take away a tool from your toolbox as to what you can make a joke about, but it also is forcing you to grow as a person.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to grow as a person, then you're stuck in the 1950s and
Yeah. Oh,
you
I
don't.
totally agree. As a self-identified very funny person, I know that my humor has changed and I have totally been like, why, I don't know, why did I used to make fun of this?
I think again, it's people making fun of the unknown, but then it's like Frankenstein, right? It's mob mentality, right? Oh, that guy's doing it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And now I'm part of the crowd. I've written a series of memoir essays, and one of them is about how we can kind of do the most harm to the communities that mean the most to us.
Mm,
And I was moving through a situation that was affecting me in a big way, but it wasn't really my story to tell. And I was stuck and I needed to talk my way through it. And so I used myself as an example. And so I used examples from when I was in high school about how I would try and distance myself and disassociate myself from my disability and disability community culture as a whole, and join in pointing the finger at the other people with disability and how I wasn't like that and how I wasn't that kind of disabled, and trying to get my friends to say things along the lines of like, I don't even see you as a person with disability. I don't see your disability, right? And for me, that just led me to further and further push myself away and further hurt other people within my community. And it wasn't until I'm gonna be 4 years sober in a week or so.
yeah.
And it wasn't until I really found myself.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't bring it up for congratulations, but for me, a big part of my drinking was a way to dissociate, but also a way to try and be seen as part of the gang, part of the guys, part of the blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And so when I went through a really hard time, dealing with a lot of internalized ableism, I was forced to reckon with my identity as a person with disability, right? To deal with the creature within me and understand and try and come to a place of being able to love myself. And a big part of that was um, reckoning with my previous actions and reckoning with the creature within. Um, and I don't know, I just feel as though I society as a whole has a lot to learn in that we need to accept ourselves in the truest way we can so that we're not just hurt people hurting other people running around trying to make ourselves feel a little better by flipping somebody off when they cut us
Yeah.
off, whatever, yeah, and I think doing that only serves to really bring a lot of communities and a lot of misunderstood things out of the dark and into the light. And I love a good creature feature as much as the next person, but it's time to start telling different stories, Like I'd love to see a really great horror thriller with disability, like the first person to die in Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the guy in the wheelchair. Like he takes
Oh,
it
is
right
it?
to the gut.
I've never seen that one either.
But that's the trope, right? Like even if disability is portrayed in a movie not in a villainous way, it's as comic relief. Like look at Scary Movie and Chris Elliott with his physical uh disability
Yeah.
mockery. But yeah, it's I forget where I was going with all that. That's something profound.
Um, well, before we say goodbye, I've been doing a new thing at the end of my episodes where it is a Mystic Cat's tarot reading. And really, all it is you are going to ask a question that is an open-ended question. I will shuffle these cards and then I'll read the answer in the book. I'm not good at this. I just want to throw that out there. I am not a tarot card reader. I just saw this at my local bookstore and I'm like, that is so cute. I'm going to buy that. And here we are. And I felt like I just needed something fun at the end of,
Yeah, yeah, of talking about existential dread and internalized ableism. Yeah,
and
something
now
like
you're gonna see what your future is. Hopefully it's good. Because there it could be
cool.
bad, but
Okay.
we got good vibes.
Will the creature ever find one true love?
Ooh, Frankenstein's creature or
Just open-ended.
open-ended. Okay, okay. Tell me, I don't know, maybe tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Oh, okay. Okay, which one? Which one? I'm gonna do this one. Okay, facing up. That's a good sign. We got Six of Pentacles. Okay, so upright, it is about community and giving and receiving. You get what you give, is the lesson here. You are in a position to share your abundance now that you are in the giving role. Oh, geez. Have gratitude for those who have helped you in the past and share your wealth with others. I feel like that you just like got to go put yourself out there. That's what I'm feeling.
Okay. Okay.
Or any creature.
Any creature, any misfit creature out there, just put
They need to
yourself.
go be vulnerable, go do that whole relationship thing.
My new kind of gig too is community building, community work, I guess. I've been holding Chatham's punk rock flea market for a year now. We've had four full markets and a handful of smaller events. And it's just Chatham's a really small town, and
Yeah.
it's a difficult space to be a person with disability or a person who is who looks like a mall goth or a punk or queer or just any sort of misfit. And so we're just trying to create community space for all Chatham's misfits to feel at home. But I also, like I mentioned, I've written a few memoir essays. I make spoony spoon rings. You can find my kind of creative projects on Handcut Company on Instagram. The logo is like a hand with a blood drop coming out of the middle finger.
Maybe.
And you can you can
I
follow
feel
me
like
on.
that's on brand though with horror films.
Oh, totally, totally. It's on point. And also the joke too is that like I'm kind of generally klutzy, so no matter what I'm doing, I'm kind of always cutting my hands. So it started with cutting stencils, and then now I'm doing jewelry. Um, whole different tool set, whole different level of cut.
Yeah.
Uh, but if people want to follow me on Instagram for more disability content and pictures of my dog, it's my full name, Adam D, as in dog or Douglas Carney. So ADAMDKEARNEY.
And I'll make
Yeah,
sure to put all this in the show notes below so people can find it.
groovy.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Well,
Um,
thanks for having me. I
taking the
love
time.
talking horror movies.
Oh my gosh. Hopefully I can go to bed tonight.
Good luck. Definitely don't watch the Poughkeepsie tapes.
Oh, I'm not watching anything. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Inclusion starts with you, and we just want to help. Bye.